Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're exploring how cutting-edge edge AI running on a literal consumer smartphone is actually solving a massive international supply chain and garbage crisis. We are looking at a genuinely fascinating intersection here: geopolitics, heavy industry, and frontier tech, and specifically how the 905 Wood Digital Refinery is stepping in to secure Ontario's industrial leadership. To really wrap our heads around this, we're going to cover 6 areas: the Ontario-Michigan Waste Corridor, USMCA tariffs and geopolitics, Ontario's looming waste cliff, bridging the quality gap, the 905 Wood Digital Refinery, and finally, securing the circular bioeconomy. So, Part 1, the Ontario-Michigan Waste Corridor. We absolutely have to start with the baseline metrics, because the structural imbalance here is staggering. For decades now, the cross-border flow of municipal solid waste, or MSW, has been this quiet but absolutely massive artery of North American logistics. Just in fiscal year 2024 alone, Michigan imported over 3.46 million tons of solid waste from Canada. Now, our human brains are terrible at visualizing volume at that scale, right? So we aren't talking about a few dozen extra garbage trucks. That volume is equivalent to roughly 115,000 to 130,000 truckloads crossing the border every single year. It's a continuous rolling conveyor belt of heavy diesel trucks shipped straight across the U.S. border from Ontario, Canada, right into Michigan landfills, every single day. Think about what that actually means. That Canadian trash consumes 14.35% of all waste disposed of in Michigan's landfills. Nearly 15% of everything buried in the state of Michigan originates in a foreign country. And for years, this whole system was driven entirely by a historically cheap 36-cent tipping fee levied by Michigan. It was simply the path of least economic resistance for Ontario to just export its industrial and commercial waste. Moving to Part 2, USMCA tariffs and geopolitics. So what happens when that cheap logistical loophole suddenly becomes a geopolitical battleground? Well, the math of this entire transboundary waste corridor has just been fundamentally rewritten by international trade friction. Let's map out the timeline of this escalation. Starting in February 2025, Donald Trump's administration in Washington invoked 25% universal tariffs on Canadian imports. Following right on the heels of that, Washington formally shifted the USMCA, or CUSMA as it's known in Canada, onto an annual review track starting in July 2026, rather than just extending it. What this means is that the North American supply chain is now in a permanent state of regulatory churn. It's creating immense uncertainty for any company relying on cross-border logistics. And compounding those federal USMCA tariffs are state-level changes. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer proposed a massive tipping fee surge, taking the cost from that cheap 36 cents all the way up to $5 per ton. That's a 1,288% increase, and it's explicitly designed to deter this cross-border dumping of municipal solid waste. The era of the cheap dumping ground, that's officially over. Which brings us to Part 3, Ontario's looming waste cliff. So how exactly is Ontario responding to this sudden border friction? With the border now acting like a massive, unpredictable tariff wall, the province's mathematical reality changed pretty much overnight. According to the W2R 2025 State of Waste Report, Ontario is facing a severe domestic infrastructure deficit. If the U.S. border restricts access and those 3.46 million tons have nowhere to go, Ontario's domestic landfill capacity will be 100% exhausted by the year 2034. Industry experts are literally calling this the waste cliff, and it is coming up fast. Objectively speaking, this exact geopolitical vulnerability is exactly why Premier Doug Ford's administration is fast-tracking some highly controversial domestic infrastructure. Ford actually stated this directly during legislative debates, saying, "Just imagine if, tomorrow, President Trump says we aren't taking any more of Ontario's waste. What do we do?" So, to build up that infrastructure self-reliance, the provincial government has been pushing forward projects like the massive Dresden York 1 landfill expansion. They're framing it as an urgent necessity to just protect Ontario's economy from potential border closures. All right, Part 4, Bridging the Quality Gap. Look, just taking new domestic landfills isn't exactly a sustainable economic strategy long-term. Ontario knows it needs to move this waste into the circular bioeconomy. The ultimate goal is to take this material and process it into high-value biocarbon, stuff that gets used for green steel production or sustainable aviation fuels. But we hit a severe quality gap between the two ends of the supply chain. On one side, you have chaotic, muddy construction waste. It's mixed grades, unpredictable moisture, it's full of hidden chemical treatments. On the flip side, The advanced biocarbon market requires pharmaceutical-level precision. We're talking less than 10% moisture, under 1% contamination, and absolutely zero toxins. You just can't feed raw chaos into a highly sensitive pyrogenic reactor. Which leads perfectly into part 5, the 905 Wood Digital Refinery. You can't bridge that massive quality gap with a clipboard and some manual labor. You need frontier artificial intelligence. Traditional laboratory testing is just way too slow and expensive for the sheer velocity of 100,000 trucks moving through a corridor. And this is where the tech steps in. 905 Wood architected something they call the Sentient Bridge to intelligently orchestrate this exact transformation, right at the physical point of origin. It's basically a digital refinery that filters out the noise, providing the rigorous quality assurance and chain of custody needed to turn what is essentially an environmental liability into a verified digital asset. So how do they actually pull this off in the literal mud of a scrapyard? They equip their frontline field operators with a Google Pixel 10 Pro running Android 16. But obviously, this isn't just your standard app. It heavily utilizes the LiteRT AI stack to process complex multidimensional data locally right on the phone's proprietary Tensor G5 silicon chip. It is running incredibly advanced models. We're talking Gemini 3.5 Pro and Claude Opus 4.8 directly on the device. That is genuinely astounding for a consumer smartphone operating in a heavy industrial setting. And this localized processing isn't just a nice-to-have, it's absolutely mandatory. In a dusty, chaotic transfer station, you often have terrible 5G cellular reception. A front-end loader operator can't just sit idle for 2 minutes waiting for some cloud server out in California to verify a load. By running the LiteRT AI stack at the edge, the device executes complex visual inference entirely offline. We are talking milliseconds, zero latency. And what exactly is that AI doing in those milliseconds? Instead of a slow physical-chemical test, which, by the way, normally involves an 18-hour acid bath just to see what toxins leach out, the AI instantly conducts a virtual 12-stage toxicity screening. It uses visual forensics to identify microscopic precursors of contamination. It can spot the sheen of synthetic glues or the specific weather patterns of chromated copper arsenate, classifying the high-purity wood grade before the truck even shifts into drive. Finally, part 6, securing the circular bioeconomy. Let's look at the actual workflow and see how this builds an unbreakable chain of custody that navigates both provincial regulations and those tricky international trade laws. The Digital Refinery application workflow's UI and UX is just flawless. It kicks off with an automated request for quote using an LLM conversational interface to capture client data. From there, it moves to instant visual and audio verification right at the gate. Step 3 is cryptographic hashing to an AlloyDB database, locking that data in tight. And then finally, Step 4 instantly generates legally binding compliance documentation. And this part is incredibly cool. The system flat out refuses to trust visual data alone. In environmental law, you pretty much have to assume danger until proven safe. So the app uses Gemini's multimodal audio sensors to actively neutralize what they call chemical intent hijacks. If a site supervisor marks the load as clean wood, but casually mentions the word demolition while standing near the phone, the audio context flags the load immediately. It ensures the operator's conversations match the actual environmental compliance reality. The final step of this workflow produces perfect, explainable compliance. The output PDF documentation features a 9-point certificate of origin. It includes the AI's confidence metrics, GPS and time-stamped seal events, and instant Ontario Regulation 347 validation. Crucially, this acts as an unalterable USMCA shield. It satisfies border agents, guarantees the purity needed for the biocarbon market, and entirely avoids those massive new tariffs. By transforming a geopolitical liability and the absolute chaos of municipal solid waste into verified digital infrastructure, 905 Wood definitively secures Ontario's industrial leadership in the global circular bioeconomy. And really, this just brilliantly illustrates the raw power of operationalizing the Google Pixel 10 Pro and that LiteRT AI stack, which leaves us with one massive question to ponder. If an advanced AI stack at the edge can flawlessly solve a 3.46 million-ton international trade crisis, what other chaotic global supply chains could it secure tomorrow?